you hear me better now? All right. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to our Thursday meeting. I see mostly familiar faces, so you guys know exactly what the agenda is. We'll opening do the opening with a message, a prayer, elevate our minds to the higher spirituality here. Then we have a talk today about anger. I just told Al I don't think we need to talk about anger because we're already so elevated. All right, so let's start with our message. In case you're having anger issues, this message fits in there. Go for a walk outdoors. Calmly rediscover nature, which has blessed your life. Unwind and exit the surrounding turmoils by letting your imagination soar. Avoid crowded places and breathe the fresh air of the woods, the mountains, and the sea. Revisit concepts, relax, and bless life in whatever form it takes for you. Your present existence is plentiful with what you need to be happy. It's not always about what we want, it's what we need. And what we need is always going to be provided. So let's close our eyes. Let's elevate our mind, our spirit. Let's connect with the higher spirituality, with all the energy that has been prepared for many hours, for a few days to receive us today, to bless us, to be a point of help in our day-to-day life. Every message we hear when we are here, every conversation has the power to elevate us. And to keep our mind connected with these higher energies, we ask for the protection of our Father. We ask for clarity of mind, for our understanding, and for our speaker to pass the message through, to bring us light. And with that, we start our meeting for tonight, giving thanks to God for our life and our opportunities. And so all right, so today we have back speaking to us our friend Turri, and we are talking about anger. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Where to start, huh? Anger. From a book, right? One chapter in a book called Existential Conflicts. We've talked about different topics of this book over the years. Devaldo Franco is the medium. The spirit is Joanna DeAngelis, and she's always hard for me to read. Not hard, but it takes effort. A lot of these chapters are not very long, but it can take a long time to read. And you're rereading the pages and the words. It's almost, it reminds me of taking a graduate class at university. The cool thing about this, though, is it's hard. The chapter starts off always with the problem, the impact of the problem, and then always consoling with advice on how to improve and correct. So it's always a challenge to get through, but it ends with good advice, and that's what I hope to leave you with today is good advice on anger. So, what is anger, right? Like, it's an emotion, right? That's all it is. It's an emotion. Like, man, I can't believe Libya asked me to speak again this month. Right? I can't believe it took 6 hours of my life. I can't believe my computer broke. Right? It's anger. It's an emotion. Now, is that bad? Is that good? We'll talk about that in a minute. What if my anger towards Livia and this talk turned into, man, I'm going to get Livia. I got a plan. She's never going to do this to me again. Or, man, that computer company that's supposed to fix my computer, I'm going to get that technician. Right? What's that? Is that an emotion? No, that's aggression. Right? So we're going to talk tonight about anger, the emotion, the good and the bad of it, the reality of it, and how to avoid anger becoming aggression. Because aggression is more than an emotion, right? It's a behavior that results from untreated anger or uncontrolled anger that usually leads to irrational decisions, to bad decisions, irrevocable decisions in a lot of cases. Make sense? All right, that's about as serious as I want to get tonight. Let's try to have fun. I don't know if it's possible with this topic though, but we'll try. Does anybody have a tissue? Never mind. I can use my map. I'm good. I'm good. I can't see. I'm fogging up here. I'm so angry. My mask is fogging up. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I've yet to find a mask that I can wear my glasses and exhale without messing around. All right, there we go. So, where were we? Joanna tells us a lot of things about anger, and how they can manifest or how they can be seen, right? And this is not a stretch, right? People get angry, they tense up, right? You can get headaches, you can get increased heart rate. There's verbal and physical expressions of anger, and they're described here as a warning sign, right? When we see these in other people, we know that they've got some angst, they're vexed, they're angry, something's not right. We display those. We warn others that we're like that. They can get more physical, right? Yelling, arguing, cursing, sarcasm, right? You can raise your clenched fist. You can throw things at the wall, break things, hit things, right? The ones that I have trouble with, they're the ones you never see, right? A lot of people can control their anger or internalize it, where it doesn't come out right away, but it can explode later on. So there's many different ways to observe that you're angry or to know that other people are angry. The key is to be observant of it and to understand that anger in of itself is nothing more than an emotion. Um, and it's triggered typically by our pride or by our ego. Something happens to us, somebody does something to us, says something to us, circumstances occur that hurt our feelings, that cause us our pride to be injured in some way, our ego to be pierced in some way, which ultimately, when we let it get to us, destroys our peace as an individual, creates a situation where we are worrying about an event, we're perseverating on it, and it gets to the point to where it can take over in a conflict and the way that we can respond with aggression, as we've already described. That's where it's no longer an emotion, right? It becomes a behavior that usually creates um, fight or flight, right? The limbic system, right? We're either trying to escape from something or conquer something, right? As a survival mechanism, because ultimately we are animals, right? To a certain extent, um, just like any other animal, in the sense of that instinctual protection mode. But we are different than your typical animal in the sense that we have free will first and foremost. Right? We can choose how we're going to react, regardless of what that initial instinct or that initial anger might lead us to want to do aggressively. We have free will and we have discernment to realize that our actions have consequences, and we don't have to choose an aggressive or a retaliatory response just because our ego or our pride is hurt. Joanna goes on to tell us that anger is definitely responsible obscuring reason, right? Rational thought, and balance in our lives, which can create not only actions at the time that are aggressive and negative towards others, but can create emotional damage internally that we will try to rectify lifetime after lifetime if we're not careful, right? If we don't correct it or prevent it. All right, too heavy so far? Or is it okay? Awesome, good. Um, the the other piece to this is anger, according to Joanna, and this is supported in human physiology, right? Um, Anger produces a high, right? There's a discharge of adrenaline and cortisol, um, which goes along with that fight or flight message or instinctual reaction. Um, and this occurs in the circulatory system, and when it reaches the nervous system, right, it produces anxiety. And what happens when we suffer from too much anxiety over extended periods of time, right? When it occurs frequently, it can lead towards varied physical damage and emotional damage. Too much cortisol and inflammation in your body is one of the leading causes of most of our chronic conditions, right? So not only is it bad for us emotionally, um, it's also bad for us physically. So limiting it or reducing it is a good thing. Except in that situation when you're cut off by a Mack truck on the highway and you've got to think very quickly and use your adrenaline to respond quickly, right? Those are good examples of when we wanted to run. Um, and that's what the next slide talks about, right? Joanna tells us that at some level, anger is a defense mechanism, and it's instinctual to save our life because it opposes the very thing that anger can turn into if we're not careful, right? Which is aggression. Our anger can serve to protect us against those that are aggressive towards us, that seek to harm us, right? So, in some ways, in a lot of ways, it's a defense mechanism. But as many of us can attest to, I know I can, when our anger is left unchecked, it definitely can turn um, our responses away from a rational reaction or um, um, a good reaction into something that has a more disastrous effect. How many of you have said or done something in anger that to this day you still regret? Okay, so it's not just me. Okay, good. I feel much better. I'm not just me. Um, but knowing this, right? The next step is being able to identify it and keep it under control, and to turn it into something that's not negative. Because as Joanna tells us, humans often attack first because they're fearing attack from others. They're always on the defensive, um, which if we leave that unchecked and we're always on the defensive, that can turn into a vicious cycle, which leads to those physical issues we talked about. It leads to poor relationships, and you're always in a bad mood. Fortunately, I never feel like even when I'm angry, I feel like I'm in a good mood. I have this lately. I seem like I can see the silver lining, if you will, in things. But I have come across people over the years. My grandmother, God love her, right? She's a wonderful lady. Have very happy memories. But she was just one of those folks. She was always cranky. Um, it was never seemed happy. If no matter what happened to her or in her life, there was always some negativity associated with it. So she was one of those people that was perpetually in a bad mood and angry. Um, um, and we can talk about reasons for that forever, but we all have our own reasons, right? We all have different circumstances. But when I think of this description, I think of her in the sense that um, we all have reasons to get mad. We all have reasons to get angry. But we also have the ability to choose what we do with those events in our lives and to how we're going to react to them. So whenever you find yourself negative or angry, if left unchecked, we have to be on the lookout for this becoming a perpetual sense of being in a bad mood, because that's just no good for anybody. Joanna goes on to tell us that anger has two routes of origin. I'll give you two guesses. Where? I'm just kidding. It's on the slide, right? But obviously, we're in a spiritual center, so we're going to talk about previous lives, right? She calls that the remote origin, where this comes from a past existence in which the spirit was more arrogant, perhaps, or narrow minded, imposing himself on others, leading to oppression and disrespect for the rights of others. Um, those examples or those experiences from previous lives, they don't dissipate or evaporate upon death of that life, right? Stays with you, right? You've got accounting to do, you've got correction to do, you've got education to do, amends to make. So, in this life, you may be angry about things and dealing with things subconsciously, right? In the sense because you don't know what's causing them in this life, but your spirit is dealing with them from a previous wrong. Easy enough. Those are the hard ones, though, right? Because we can't put our finger on it necessarily. When I know what I'm angry about, it's easier to fix and resolve. The second is current origin. So things that happened in this life, today, yesterday, 10 years ago, things I can remember, things that I can, I can actually put a timeline on. Um, and these present day events provoke anger due to temperamental issues, educational issues, socioeconomic issues. How many of the world's problems or your own problems, my own problems, occur because of financial, right? Don't have enough money for this, or I spent too much on that, or somebody ripped me off, right? We definitely have a lot of anger about money. Um, Factors that push us to painful situations that generate conflict. So those three areas: temperamental issues, educational, and socioeconomic, for primarily current issues. Joanna reminds us that regardless of the cause, whether it's present day or remote origins from previous lives, is the key to this is keeping ourselves in balance, right? And that's I'm not talking about touch my finger kind of balance, right? She's talking about um, spiritual balance. She's talking about life balance. If we are not staying in balance, we have much more likelihood to react negatively in unexpected situations. So she calls or says that keeping ourselves in balance is the best preventative medicine for controlling our anger. Because being in balance and trying to understand the situation prior to adopting a defensive attitude is going to be our biggest weapon to protect ourselves from having anger turn into aggression. And that's easier said than done, right? Um, how do we slow down? How do we not react? How do we not let our temper or our anger get the better of us? And she's going to give us some tips here. Um, she tells us that if by letting small irritations build up, right? If we don't release them, um, that makes us unhappy and those around us unhappy. So, in other words, if you're having if you have a bad experience, if you have something that um, is a problem, it should be dealt with at the time, right? Don't just bury it or hold it inside. I I not my current relationship. You guys know my wife today; she's wonderful. But I've been in relationships before where um, let's say I did something wrong on Friday, right? Well, not only did I hear about Friday, but I heard about everything I did wrong, like for all the years we were together, right? Because every little thing didn't get dealt with at the time. So my point is, if I have a problem with somebody today, or if my wife and I, because it's a beautiful relationship, but every day sometimes you have disagreements or you have things that you want to work on, or you think differently. So now we have a very good situation. I have a very good situation now in the sense that um, my wife is very good at sharing her thoughts and her feelings, and I'm getting better with it because I come from a history where men don't necessarily show their emotions or talk about their problems, right? But with her help and with studying, we're very good at just little things. Talk about them right when they happen. So my wife and I we don't blow up. We don't have um, those events that I can think of in previous relationships when I didn't necessarily think like this. So my point is, Joanna makes a lot of sense to me, and I hope she does for you. Is release these things as they come up. Don't let them linger. Don't let them build up, because if we do, they afflict us emotionally. They shorten our temper, and they definitely lead us. They can lead us into depressive disorders, which can also lead to resentment and feeling as though life is unfair. So there you go. She also goes on and reiterates that frequent and prolonged anger are responsible for disorders of the central nervous system, dysfunction of the endocrine function, problems with the digestive system, and abnormal psychological behavior. These are extreme cases, right? These are not um, um, little things, right? But prolonged anger that's stored up, that's not released, that's not worked on, uh, can wreak havoc on different systems of the body. This is a big one. How many of you can relate to this? Unconscious guilt, right? She tells us this dominates many people, which creates an expectation on their part of punishment of some form. They're not worthy. They're not good enough. They did bad things. So they're walking around living life expecting to be punished. And when they don't experience it, it can lead to self punishment by avoiding happiness. And I think that is that category that um, when I discussed my grandmother previously, I think this had a lot to do with her constant irritation. I think I'm not a psychologist, but knowing what I know, I think this was a big indicator for her. Um, so much so, this can happen to someone that even if there's a solution and there's a way to be happy, that you won't let yourself find happiness. Um, and that it can lead to arming yourself with aggression where you attack first, you don't allow people to get close to you, you don't allow help in, if you will. So this is a very difficult situation. It's dangerous, um, but it does happen, so we should be on guard for that. She goes on to tells us that when anger prevails, um, we'll see things that stem from anger, but they're disguised as something less less intense, perhaps. So, her examples here are cruelty disguised as jealousy, insecurity becomes unhappiness, an inferiority complex disguised as envy, right? Unnecessary tensions invade the emotional system. Remember, these emotions when turned into aggression, right? Anger is an emotion, um, and the behavior, the aggression, the way it's taken out on someone else, or the way it manifests, is where it becomes negative. So, in other words, as we feel these things happening, we have to be on guard. We have to be alert to it, and we have to try to release these feelings um, in small doses before they build up and manifest in situations like this. Because ultimately, left unchecked, um, these these bad things become second nature, and we respond from a place of of negativity, if you will, all the time. She goes on to tell us that anger is a feeling of disagreement, which makes sense, right? If we agreed with what the other people are doing or saying, or what's happening to us, we probably wouldn't be angry, right? If we were harmonious, right? So it makes sense. It's a feeling of disagreement, um, of the emotions that deserve constant surveillance so that it does not become our standard mode of conduct. Again, she reminds us, right? Just like I said in the beginning, anger is normal. There's nothing wrong with being angry, right? It's a an emotion that's real, it's explainable, and it happens. The problem, again, right? She reiterates, it's the inability to manage anger is when it becomes dangerous. When anger becomes routine, when anger becomes your first response, when it turns into aggressive behavior, that's when it's a problem. But there's nothing wrong in and of itself with anger. So don't beat yourself up if you get mad. Um, just don't let that turn into all right. So here's anger. She tells us that when anger sets in, um, we're advised to seek courage and to postpone decision making. How many times I tell my kids, count to 10, right? Take a deep breath and count to 10. Oh, that's what she's telling us here. Take a deep breath and count to 10, right? Postpone decision making when you're angry. Um, that's hard for me. Patience is not my strong suit. But if we can be patient, if we can slow down, that feeling of anger, that emotion of anger will pass. And if we can slow down, we're going to communicate with more clarity, right? Because we're not communicating out of a place of anger or emotion. And that time that you wait and you calm down will lead to further discussion to reduce hurting someone else's ego, like yours was hurt when you were angry, and you won't have the likelihood of inappropriate actions. Easier said than done, but it's good advice. She goes on to tell us that silence constitutes an indispensable resource, right, that helps us avoid the feelings of irritation and its consequences. How difficult, though, is it to hold your tongue when you're angry? Um, I guess that changes or varies for each of us. Um, for me, keeping my mouth shut has always been a challenge. um, but as I get older, I think having children has helped me to some degree too, because I think I'm developing more patience with them. But the point here is silence can stop the invasion of the mental bombardment imposed by your opponent. If you don't let yourself get caught up into it, if you don't let yourself get sucked into it, um, if you can just stay quiet and be reflective, it won't escalate. But again, easier said than done. I have a I have a difficult work relationship at times, and we have an agreement now. If we feel like our disagreement or our difference of opinion could be interfering with the rest of the meeting or whatever situation we are in, whoever recognizes that first will say, "Hey, you know what? We can take that offline." Right? And as long as we both abide by that, we we don't have any issues, and we get together later and we solve whatever disagreement that we have or difference of opinion. Um, so that's one way of that helping me be silent in those situations. So that's my tip, not Joanna's, but it ties into her tip, I guess. She encourages us to cultivate a mindset um, that in which we consider ourselves a person or a spirit with virtue. Right? How often do we look at ourselves as a person with a virtue? I think it's quite easy for us to find fault in things or be critical of ourselves. But she says, you know, consider yourself a person with virtues first and foremost, and then faults as well, right? That can be corrected. First and foremost, you're a person with virtues, with some faults that can be corrected, right? You're a work in progress. You're more virtuous than you uh, are not virtuous, right? And then she says to remember that you're subject to variations in humor and behavior. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, you're going to have better moods some days than others, right? And you're easily susceptible to annoyances and disagreements. Don't beat yourself up. In other words, you're gonna get sucked in sometimes to disagreements. Um, and in a lot of ways, she says, remember, you have to be rather predisposed to keeping a careful watch because in a lot of ways, it's easy to give in to anger. It's easy to give in to negativity. That we have to constantly be on guard. We have to be alert and listen carefully to our actions, to our thoughts, so that we can catch um, anger turning into aggression before it does. And she says, when necessary, utilize surveillance as a measure of wisdom. If any negative feeling is identified, ignore it. Do not attribute any value or meaning to it. Want me to read that again? Right? If any negative feeling is identified, ignore it. Do not attribute any value of meaning to it. And that's crazy in a lot of ways. How do you not attribute meaning, right? How do you stop that? And then it dawned on me, an audiologist, right? I counsel patients all day on many different things about the ear, but one of the most difficult things for a difficult patient for me is a patient that has tinnitus, right? That's a noise in your ear, a noise in your head. It's real. It stems from damage to the auditory system. The brain creates a, um, a sound in the brain because it's not getting the signal from the ear. It's like losing part of your arm, right? People that don't have a limb still feel pain, right? Because the brain is looking for input from nerves. But this is acoustical. And I can tell you at least twice a day, I tell people, you know, just got to ignore it, right? Try to turn it in from a negative to a positive, make it a neutral event. So I say this to people all the time, right? Um, and I give them tools to help them. And then I read this and I say, this sounds crazy, right? So hard. But yet I ask people to do the same thing. So my point to that story is um, regardless of what we face, if we can be observant, if we can be patient and do our best to take anything that could be perceived as a negative and try to find the positive, try to turn it into, at the very least, a neutral event, um, as opposed to letting it manifest and driving us crazy or perseverating on how bad it is. Um, so, um, again, that's easier said than done, but the goal is to try not to attribute any value or meaning to negative things that happen to us. And again, she says to exercise patience. Why? Because that helps us to accept the fact that we're vulnerable, right? We're all susceptible. We're all vulnerable. Bad things are going to happen. We're going to get angry. But if we can exercise patience and not let that anger turn into aggression, we have a higher likelihood of avoiding that episodic anger, um, and having situations develop into more serious situations because we acted rationally out of anger. Make sense? All right. So, her final point on this about the consistency or constant stages of anger, if we don't control it, it leads to stress, anxiety, insecurity, and morbid fear, um, which, as that develops, it can be greatly assisted by psychotherapy, right? By psychological therapy, in order to determine the cause of the disturbing phenomenon. So if we don't let it go, if we let it go unchecked and it manifests and it becomes a chronic state of negativity, of being in a bad mood, of stress, of insecurity, it will develop into psychological disorders and issues that you're going to need professional help. So she is encouraging psychological therapy in this situation. She says that caring psychotherapy uh, will go back to the forgotten conflicts in the unconscious, um, which had their origins at an earlier time or perhaps in previous existence. And it's going to address the small annoyances that you've left unchecked, that you've let accumulate over time, um, that can easily trigger anger. And by doing that therapy, you can reduce their likelihood or you can resolve those conflicts. And thus reduce your aggressive uh, behavior as a result of the anger. She says, in addition to psychotherapy, prayer therapy and meditation are hugely helpful for these situations. I want to thank Valdo since he's here. You and Christiani, the last Thursday of the month, have been phenomenal for me getting back into the habit of meditation. So thank you for reminding me of first how easy it is if you just make the time, and secondly the positive impact that it can have. So, with prayer and meditation, um, you can create great resources for controlling emotions. That the whole practice of meditation teach you how to calm down, teach you how to kind of stop, right? Which can help with your patience. It also helps restore vital energy, right? When you stop and meditate and focus on well-being, it calms the central nervous system, and all of those will assist reducing the incidence of anger. All right, 2 more hours. I'm almost done. Additional therapies that she mentions, which we all can do, right? Good reading enriches the mind with optimism. There's what, 2 bookshelves there, 3 bookshelves there with books that you don't even have to buy, right? You can just borrow them. Just check them out. Good listening evaluates your vibration. I'm actually listening to a book to teach me how to listen. Um, there's very good resources out there. I drive a lot, so I don't have to. I don't necessarily have a lot of time to read, but I like to listen to audiobooks. And as I was preparing this, um, I found a book that teaches you how to listen. So, in other words, there's resources out there to help you. Um, yeah, right. Attending study groups and meetings. We have classes here on Tuesday nights. Are we open again for classes? Right? Yeah, so they're open. The goal for the fall is to have an English class again for study.
If anybody has interest in taking classes, let us know up front so we can start to work towards that.
Yes, that's the goal. We have fraternal counseling here. Right? This is one of her recommendations. Fraternal counseling we have here on Wednesday nights, which is open to the public. The gospel at home. If you're not doing that, who is helping? Yvette's still doing that, so I don't see her. But if you're interested in learning how to do the gospel at home and the resources, we have a training program for that. And then obviously attending here on Thursdays or Monday and getting passes is also recommended by Joanna. Additional therapies you can do to help calm yourself and rebalance, primarily balance yourself, so that you're less likely to have anger issues.
And that was the whole message on the beginning.
Yes,
In the woods, calm yourself
yes,
down.
exactly. And this is the final slide, right? She tells us beyond a shadow of a doubt, self control is crucial. And it sounds like common sense, but when you're caught up in the moment, self control is not always easy. But she says we can do it. We know we can do it, right? We each have access to it and should maintain it in relation to our emotional reactions. Disciplining our will, educating our feelings, adapting new healthy habits all lead to achieving a rich and healthy existence, right? And just like we started, right? Maintaining balance, right? That's in the first slide and it's in the last slide. Maintaining balance is the key to controlling, um, not controlling, but living with anger, which is very real and natural, and not letting it turn into aggression or a behavior that we'll regret. So, thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you.